I am Claire, 32 years old, and I always believed that family meant standing by each other through anything. When I was diagnosed with a life-threatening condition requiring emergency surgery, I never imagined my parents would refuse to help me, while spending a fortune on my sister Amanda's wedding instead. The betrayal cut deeper than any scalpel ever could. Before I share how my own parents chose my sister's wedding over my life, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt betrayed by those who should have protected you. Growing up in suburban Pennsylvania, our family seemed normal on the surface. My parents, Thomas and Judith Wilson, raised my younger sister Amanda and me in a comfortable middle-class home with a well-manicured lawn and family photos lining the hallway walls. From the outside looking in, we were the picture-perfect American family. I was the firstborn, the responsible one. From an early age, I was taught to lead by example for my sister who came 4 years after me. I took this role seriously, excelling in school, participating in extracurricular activities, and helping around the house without complaint. I was the child who brought home straight A's, who organized her own school supplies before the semester began, who babysit the neighbors' kids to save for college. Amanda, on the other hand, was the baby of the family. Pretty sociable and just charming enough to get away with nearly anything. While I studied on weekend nights, Amanda went to parties. When I saved my allowance, Amanda spent hers immediately and then somehow convinced our parents she needed more. The pattern was established early. I was expected to be responsible, while Amanda was allowed to be carefree. Claire has everything under control too, my mother would say whenever I expressed frustration about the double standard. Amanda needs more guidance. This guidance apparently translated to more attention, more leniency, and decidedly more financial support. I first noticed the physical symptoms when I was 16, occasional headaches and brief moments where my vision would blur. I mentioned it to my parents, but they dismissed it as eye strain from studying too hard or stress from my advanced placement classes. "You work yourself too hard, Claire," my father said, barely looking up from his newspaper. "Maybe you should take it easy like Amanda." By the time I graduated high school as valedictorian, the symptoms had become occasional enough that I pushed them aside. My focus was on the future. I had received a partial scholarship to Penn State, but it wasn't enough to cover all expenses. My parents contributed what they called a fair amount, but I still needed to work part-time throughout college to make ends meet. Meanwhile, when Amanda decided she wanted to attend an expensive private college 2 years later, my parents somehow found the money to cover her costs entirely. "Your sister isn't as academically gifted as you," my mother explained when I questioned the discrepancy. "She needs to focus on her studies, not work." Despite everything, I thrived. I majored in graphic design, building a portfolio that landed me an internship and then a job offer at a growing tech company in Seattle. Moving 3,000 miles away from Pennsylvania was both terrifying and liberating. For the first time, I was truly independent, building my own life away from the shadow of family dynamics that had always left me feeling second best. Over the next few years, I established myself professionally, making new friends, and eventually meeting James, a software engineer who quickly became the most supportive person I'd ever known. Visits home became limited to major holidays, and while the distance strained some family bonds, it also provided a healthy buffer. I could handle the subtle favoritism in small doses, especially with James by my side, noticing and validating what I experienced. During Christmas 2 years ago, things seemed to be improving. My parents appeared genuinely interested in my career, and there was less of the usual tension. Then Amanda announced her engagement to Bradford Williams, the son of a prominent local business family. My parents were ecstatic, immediately talking about wedding venues and guest lists. "This will be the social event of the season," my mother gushed, already mentally planning what was clearly going to be an extravagant affair. I was happy for my sister and tried to share in the excitement. James squeezed my hand under the table, his silent support reminding me that I had found my own happiness away from the complicated dynamics of my family of origin. I had James, my career, and a life I had built for myself. That was enough. What I didn't know then was how quickly that carefully constructed life would begin to crumble, and how the wedding excitement would soon cast a dark shadow over my very survival. The headaches returned with a vengeance about 8 months ago. What started as occasional discomfort evolved into debilitating pain that would leave me unable to function for hours. Along with the pain came more frequent episodes of blurred vision, sometimes accompanied by dizziness so severe I had to sit down wherever I was. "You need to see a doctor," James insisted, after finding me curled up on our bathroom floor one Sunday morning, the pain so intense I couldn't even cry. "This isn't normal, Claire." I knew he was right. After years of pushing aside my symptoms and focusing on building my career, I couldn't ignore what was happening anymore. The first doctor I saw, a general practitioner, ordered basic blood tests and suggested it might be chronic migraine. The medication he prescribed did nothing. 2 weeks later, after an episode that left me vomiting from pain, James took me to the emergency room. This time, the doctor ordered an MRI. When the results came back, her expression changed from professional concern to something more grave. "We found something that requires further investigation," she said carefully. "I'm referring you to Dr. Harrison, a neurological specialist. He'll be able to give you more information." The waiting period between that ER visit and my appointment with Dr. Harrison was the longest 3 days of my life. James and I spent hours online researching possible diagnoses based on my symptoms, each possibility more frightening than the last. By the time we sat in Dr. Harrison's office, I was prepared for bad news, but nothing could have truly prepared me for what he said. "You have what's called an arteriovenous malformation, or AVM," Dr. Harrison explained, pointing to a specific area on my brain scan. "It's an abnormal tangle of blood vessels connecting arteries and veins. In your case, it's located in a critical area of your brain." He went on to explain that I had likely been born with this condition, but it had grown over time. The headaches, vision problems, and dizziness were all symptoms of the increasing pressure it was putting on my brain. "Without treatment, Ms. Wilson, this condition is life-threatening," he said, his voice gentle but direct. "The risk of hemorrhage increases with time. If those blood vessels rupture, it could cause a severe stroke or even death." James gripped my hand so tightly it almost hurt. "What are the treatment options?" he asked, his voice steady, even as I felt myself going numb with shock. Dr. Harrison outlined several possibilities. Conventional surgery carried significant risks due to the location of my AVM. Radiation therapy might work, but would take years to fully treat the malformation, during which time I would still be at risk. Then he mentioned a third option. "There's a new minimally invasive procedure being performed by Dr. Layla Chen at Northwest Medical Center," he said. "It uses a combination of embolization techniques and targeted treatment that has shown remarkable success for cases like yours. I believe it would give you the best chance at a full recovery with minimal risk." The catch, of course, was the cost. As Dr. Harrison explained, the procedure was still considered experimental by many insurance companies. My insurance would cover approximately 40%, leaving me responsible for around $175,000. Is there any way to appeal the insurance decision? I asked, my mind already racing to figure out how I could possibly afford this. "We can try, but these appeals typically take months, sometimes over a year," Dr. Harrison replied. "Given the progression of your symptoms, I wouldn't recommend waiting that long." Over the next few weeks, James and I explored every possible financial avenue. I had some savings, about $30,000 that I'd been setting aside for a home down payment someday. James immediately offered his savings as well, another $25,000. My company had good benefits and offered an emergency medical fund that could provide another $10,000. Still, we were nowhere near the amount needed, and my symptoms were getting worse each week. One night, after I had to leave work early due to another debilitating headache, James brought up the subject I'd been avoiding. "You need to talk to your parents, Claire," he said softly, holding an ice pack to my forehead. "I know things have always been complicated with them, but this is your life we're talking about." I shook my head slightly, careful not to trigger more pain. "You don't understand. They've always prioritized Amanda, even if they have the money they're planning her wedding now. That's all they care about." James set the ice pack aside and looked me directly in the eyes. "This isn't about favoritism anymore. This is literally life or death. They're your parents. Whatever issues you have, they wouldn't let you die when they could help." Looking into his concerned eyes, I allowed myself to believe he might be right. Surely, when faced with the seriousness of my condition, my parents would step up. This wasn't about who got a larger allowance or whose college was fully funded. This was their daughter's life. Okay, I finally agreed. We'll go see them next weekend. Little did I know that I was setting myself up for the most painful betrayal of my life. The 5-hour flight from Seattle to Pennsylvania gave me plenty of time to rehearse what I would say to my parents. James sat beside me occasionally, squeezing my hand in silent support as I practiced my explanation of the diagnosis, the treatment options, and the financial situation. Remember, stay calm and factual, he advised. Make sure they understand the seriousness without it seeming like you're being dramatic. I nodded, though we both knew the irony. My entire life, I had been the undramatic daughter, the reasonable one, the one who didn't make waves. Now, when I needed to advocate for my very survival, I was worried about appearing too emotional. My parents greeted us warmly when we arrived at their house. My mother had prepared a family dinner, mentioning that Amanda and Bradford would be joining us. The house looked exactly as it always had, with one notable addition: a large wedding planning binder prominently displayed on the living room coffee table. "We're so excited about the wedding plans," my mother gushed before we'd even put our bags down. "Amanda has selected the most beautiful venue, a historic mansion with gardens that will look stunning for a June ceremony." I exchanged a glance with James, who gave me an encouraging nod. We had agreed that I would wait until after dinner to bring up my situation, wanting to have everyone's full attention for such an important conversation. Dinner was predictably focused on Amanda's wedding preparations. The caterer, they were considering the designer dress. Amanda had her eye on the exotic honeymoon locations Bradford's parents had offered to fund. My sister looked radiant as she showed off her large diamond engagement ring and detailed the string quartet she wanted for the ceremony. "The total is coming in around 200,000, my father mentioned casually over dessert. "But you can't put a price on your daughter's special day, right?" James choked slightly on his coffee, and I felt a surge of both hope and dread. If my parents could afford to spend that much on a single day, surely they could help save my life. After dinner, as we moved to the living room, I finally found my opening. "I actually have something important I need to talk to you all about," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. My mother's smile faltered slightly. "Is everything okay, dear?" For the next 20 minutes, I explained everything: the increasing headaches, the diagnosis, the AVM that had been quietly threatening my life since birth. I showed them the scans on my tablet, explained Dr. Harrison's prognosis, and detailed the innovative surgery that offered my best chance at survival. James added supportive information when appropriate, particularly when explaining the financial aspects. As I spoke, the room grew increasingly quiet. My father's expression became grave. My mother's eyes welled with tears, and Amanda sat unusually silent, her engagement ring glinting as she twisted it around her finger. "So that's where I am," I concluded. "The surgery cost $290,000. Insurance will cover about 40%. Between my savings, James's contribution, and help from my company, we have about $65,000. I need another $175,000, and time is really not on my side." The silence that followed felt oppressive. "We had no idea," my mother finally said, her voice shaking. "Why didn't you tell us sooner that you were so ill?" "I only received the definitive diagnosis 3 weeks ago," I explained, "and I wanted to research all the options before coming to you." My father cleared his throat. "This is a lot to process, Claire. Your mother and I will need to discuss this privately. We'll talk more in the morning, all right?" It wasn't the immediate offer of help I had secretly hoped for, but it was reasonable. This was a significant amount of money, and they would need to look at their finances. "Of course," I said. "James and I are staying at the hotel downtown. We can meet for breakfast." That night at the hotel, I allowed myself to feel cautiously optimistic. James and I discussed possible scenarios, including whether my parents might be able to provide partial assistance. "Even if they can contribute half, we could make up the rest with loans," James suggested. "The important thing is getting you this surgery as soon as possible." I fell asleep that night, believing that by the next day I would have a plan in place to save my life. Instead, I was about to face the most devastating breakfast conversation imaginable. The following morning, James and I arrived at the local diner where my family had often celebrated special occasions throughout my childhood. My parents were already there, sitting across from each other in a booth near the back. Neither was eating, just nursing cups of coffee with serious expressions. The knot in my stomach tightened as we approached. Something in their body language told me this would not be the conversation I had hoped for. "Good morning," I said, sliding into the booth beside my mother while James sat next to my father. The waitress came by immediately, but after a quick order of coffee for James and orange juice for me, an uncomfortable silence descended on the table. "So," my father finally began after the waitress left, "your mother and I discussed your situation last night." He paused, looking down at his coffee cup instead of meeting my eyes. "We wish we could help you, Claire, we really do. But we've already committed all our available funds to Amanda's wedding." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at him, certain I had misheard. "You're saying you won't help me with life-saving surgery because you're paying for Amanda's wedding?" The words came out as barely more than a whisper. My mother reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "It's not that simple, dear. We've already signed contracts with vendors. There are non-refundable deposits. Amanda and Bradford have their hearts set on this June date." "Are you serious right now?" James interjected, his voice tight with controlled anger. "You're comparing wedding deposits to Claire's life." My father's face hardened. "This is a family matter, James. With all due respect, you're not family." "I'm more family to Claire than you're being right now," James shot back. "You don't understand," my mother said, tears forming in her eyes. "Amanda has been planning her dream wedding since she was a little girl. The venue, the dress, everything is booked. We gave our word." A cold clarity washed over me as I realized what was happening. This wasn't about deposits or contracts. This was the same pattern that had defined my entire life, just with impossibly higher stakes. "You've already spent some of the money, I understand that," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "But what about your savings, your retirement accounts? You could take a loan against the house. There have to be options." My father shook his head. "We've extended ourselves significantly for this wedding. Amanda is marrying into the Williams family. It needs to be a certain caliber of event. So my sister's social standing is worth more than my life." The words hung in the air between us. "That's not fair, Claire," my mother said. "We love you both equally." A bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. "Equally. When have you ever treated us equally? Amanda always came first for everything, but I never thought it would come to this." My voice broke on the last word. As if on cue, the diner door opened and Amanda walked in. She spotted us and approached the table, her expression guarded. "I thought I might find you all here," she said, sliding in beside my mother. "Did you tell her?" The casual way she asked the question made it clear she already knew their decision. They had discussed this with her before even talking to me. "You knew they were going to say no," I said, the betrayal cutting even deeper. Amanda had the grace to look slightly ashamed, but it didn't last. "It's not like I asked for this to happen right before my wedding. Your timing is really inconsiderate, Claire." I stared at her in disbelief. "My timing? You think I scheduled a life-threatening brain condition to inconvenience your wedding plans?" "That's not what I meant," she backpedaled. "It's just you always do this. Whenever something important is happening in my life, you find a way to make it about you." "Make it about me? I'm literally fighting for my life." My voice rose, causing several diners to look our way. "See, now you're making a scene," Amanda hissed. "This is why I didn't want to tell you about the engagement until after Christmas. You always have some drama." James stood up suddenly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I've heard enough." "These people are not worth another minute of your time, Claire." My father's face reddened. "Now wait just a minute, young man." "No, you wait." James said, his voice low but intense. "Your daughter has a life-threatening condition that could be fixed with money you are choosing to spend on flowers and cake and a party. If you can live with that decision, fine. But don't pretend it's about contracts or deposits or timing. It's about who you value and who you don't. I stood up beside James, suddenly feeling like I couldn't breathe in the small space of the booth. Claire, please, my mother began reaching for me again. Don't, I said, stepping back. Just don't. I thought when it really mattered, when it was this important, you would be there for me. I was wrong. We left the diner with my parents calling after us, and Amanda sitting in stunned silence. In the rental car, I finally broke down sobbing as James held me awkwardly across the center console. I can't believe they would do this, I kept saying between sobs. How can they choose a wedding over my life? James had no answers, only comfort to offer, as we drove back to the hotel to pack our things and catch the next flight back to Seattle. As the plane took off that afternoon, I watched Pennsylvania disappear beneath the clouds, feeling as though I was leaving behind not just a state, but the last illusion I had about my family. The flight back to Seattle passed in a blur. I spent most of it either crying silently or staring numbly out the window, trying to process the magnitude of what had just happened. James kept his arm around me, occasionally pressing a gentle kiss to my temple, but even his steady presence couldn't penetrate the growing sense of despair. Back in our apartment, the reality of my situation hit with full force. Without my parents' help, the surgery seemed impossibly out of reach. And according to Dr. Harrison, time was not on my side. We'll figure this out, James promised as we lay in bed that night, neither of us able to sleep. There are other options, we just need to get creative. But creativity couldn't change the basic math. We needed more money than we had, and we needed it soon. 2 days after our return, while James was at work and I was attempting to distract myself with a design project, the worst happened. One moment I was adjusting colors on my screen, and the next I was on the floor, my body seizing uncontrollably. I was vaguely aware of knocking over my desk chair of my limbs, moving without my command, before everything went black. I woke up in the hospital with James sitting beside my bed, his face ashen with fear. Dr. Harrison stood nearby, reviewing my charts with a grave expression. "You had a seizure, Claire," he explained once he saw I was conscious. "A significant one. The AVM is growing more aggressively than we initially thought." James gripped my hand. "She was alone when it happened. I came home for lunch and found her unconscious. If I hadn't come home—" He couldn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. "We need to accelerate our timeline," Dr. Harrison said. "Based on these new scans, I would recommend surgery within the next 4 to 6 weeks." 4 to 6 weeks to come up with over $100,000. It seemed impossible. The following days passed in a haze of fear and desperate planning. James took leave from work to care for me as the doctors advised I shouldn't be alone following the seizure. My company was understanding about my need for medical leave, but with each day away, the financial pressure mounted. James organized a fundraiser among our friends and colleagues, a dinner event, at a local restaurant whose owner was a friend of a friend. It raised just over $15,000, a generous amount that still fell far short of what we needed. My coworker started a collection, and my boss surprised us by announcing that the company would increase their contribution to $20,000. It was a generous gesture that moved me to tears, but the gap remained daunting. We started an online crowdfunding campaign, sharing my story without mentioning my family's refusal to help. Despite my situation, I couldn't bring myself to publicly shame them, though James argued they deserved it. The campaign gained some traction locally, especially after a few of my colleagues shared it widely on social media. Donations trickled in, mostly small amounts from strangers moved by my story. Every notification brought a mixture of gratitude and anxiety, as the total crept slowly upward, still far from our goal. Then came an unexpected call from my past. Megan Taylor had been my best friend throughout high school, before we drifted apart during college. We had reconnected occasionally on social media, but hadn't spoken directly in years. "I saw your fundraiser, Claire," she said when I answered the phone. "I had no idea you were going through this." We talked for nearly an hour, catching up on years of life events before circling back to my current situation. Megan asked detailed questions about my condition, the proposed surgery, and the timeline. "My grandmother left me some money when she passed last year," she said near the end of our conversation. "I've been saving it for something important. I think this qualifies." 2 days later, Megan transferred $40,000 to the fundraising account. When I called her sobbing with gratitude, she brushed it off. You were the person who tutored me through calculus and stayed up all night helping me finish my college applications, she said simply. You've always been there for others. Let someone be there for you. Her generosity sparked a new wave of donations as she shared the campaign with her extensive network. A local news station contacted me about doing a feature on my story, particularly highlighting the community response. You should tell them everything, James urged, about your parents choosing the wedding over your surgery. People should know what they did. I was tempted, especially in my darker moments, when the betrayal felt fresh and raw. But something held me back. This isn't about revenge, I told James. It's about surviving. I don't want negativity to be what defines this experience. The news feature aired without mention of my family drama, focusing instead on the community rallying around a local designer facing a medical crisis. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Donations poured in, and by the end of the week following the broadcast, we had raised another $30,000. We were getting closer, but still not close enough. And then the invitation arrived. The cream-colored envelope bore my parents' return address, its heavy cardstock and gold embossing screaming expense. Inside was an ornate invitation to Amanda and Bradford's engagement party, scheduled for the following weekend at an exclusive country club in my hometown. I stared at it for a long time, emotions warring within me. Anger hurt disbelief. And beneath it all, a persistent thread of hope that somehow my parents might have reconsidered their decision. You can't seriously be thinking of going, James said, when I showed him the invitation. I sank onto our couch, the invitation still in my hand. What if this is their way of opening the door to reconciliation? What if they've changed their minds? James sat beside me, his expression softening. Claire, I know you want to believe the best of them. It's one of the things I love about you. But these people watched you walk away after telling you they wouldn't help save your life. An engagement party invitation doesn't change that. Deep down, I knew he was right. But the desperate part of me, the part that was watching the calendar with increasing dread as my surgical window narrowed, wondered if I should make one last appeal. I need to try one more time, I finally said. In person, where they can't avoid facing what they're doing. Not for me, but for them. So they never have to live with wondering if they could have saved me and didn't. James disagreed strongly, arguing that I needed to focus on my health, not family drama. But after several long conversations, he reluctantly agreed to accompany me to Pennsylvania for the engagement party, on the condition that we would leave immediately if things went poorly. The day of the party arrived, and I found myself standing outside the country club, my heart pounding as I smoothed down the simple blue dress I had chosen. James stood beside me in a suit, his jaw set in a way that told me he was preparing for battle if necessary. Ready? He asked, offering his arm. I nodded, taking a deep breath. Ready? The country club ballroom was decorated lavishly with elaborate floral arrangements and champagne flowing freely. As we entered, I scanned the room quickly, spotting my sister in an expensive white dress holding court among a group of admirers. My parents stood nearby greeting guests with practiced smiles. Those smiles froze when they saw me. Claire, my mother said as we approached, her voice tight, we didn't think you would come. That's why you sent the invitation, I asked quietly. Because you thought I wouldn't show up. My father glanced around nervously at the nearby guests. This isn't the time or place for this discussion. It's Amanda's special day. One of many special days she'll have, I replied, while I'm fighting for any days at all. Amanda noticed us then, excusing herself from her friends to join the increasingly tense conversation. Claire, you came. Her surprise seemed genuine, though not necessarily pleased. Can we speak privately? I asked, looking at my family. Just for a few minutes. After some hesitation and whispered objections from Amanda, they agreed. We moved to a small private room off the main ballroom, a space clearly meant for the bridal party to prepare. James came with us despite my father's pointed look. I had a seizure, I said once the door closed behind us, deciding to get straight to the point. After we returned from seeing you, the doctors say the AVM is growing faster than they thought. I have 4 to 6 weeks to get this surgery. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Oh, Claire. We've raised some money, I continued. Friends, coworkers, even my old high school friend Megan contributed from her inheritance. Strangers from the internet have donated. Everyone except my own family. We've explained our situation, my father began. Yes, you've made your priorities clear, I interrupted. I just wanted you to have all the information, to know exactly what your decision means. Amanda, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. Why are you doing this? You're trying to ruin my engagement party, just like you're trying to ruin my wedding. The accusation was so absurd that I actually laughed, though there was no humor in it. Ruin your wedding by dying? Is that what you think I'm planning? That's not what she meant. My mother interjected quickly. Then what did she mean? James asked. Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like Amanda thinks Claire's medical emergency is some kind of attention-seeking ploy. You don't understand the pressure I'm under, Amanda said defensively. This wedding is connecting our family to the Williams family. Do you know how important they are in this community? The door opened then, and Bradford Williams himself walked in looking confused. There you are. People are asking where the guests of honor went. He paused, noticing the tension in the room. Is everything okay? No one spoke for a moment. Then Amanda plastered on a smile. Everything's fine, darling. Just a little family discussion. Bradford's gaze moved between all of us, lingering on my tear-streaked face and James's protective stance. Doesn't seem fine to me. What's going on? Nothing that concerns you, my father said smoothly. Wedding business. Something in me snapped. All the years of playing the good daughter, of accepting less of understanding and making excuses for my family's behavior. It all fell away in that moment. That's not true, I said clearly. We're discussing how my parents have refused to help pay for my life-saving brain surgery because they've committed all their money to Amanda's wedding. The color drained from Bradford's face. What? In the stunned silence that followed, I explained my condition, the needed surgery, and my parents' decision. Bradford listened intently, his expression growing increasingly disturbed. Let me get this straight, he said when I finished. Claire needs emergency surgery for a condition that could kill her, and you've refused to help because of our wedding. It's more complicated than that, my mother began. Is it? Bradford asked. Because it sounds pretty straightforward to me. He turned to Amanda. Did you know about this? Amanda flushed. I knew she needed surgery, but it's not my fault she waited until right before our wedding to bring it up. Bradford stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. She has a brain condition that could kill her, and you're worried about the timing. You don't understand, Amanda said, reaching for his hand. This wedding is so important. Your parents expect... My parents would be horrified, Bradford interrupted, pulling his hand away. They would never expect someone to prioritize our wedding over a family member's life. He turned to me, his expression softening. Claire, I had no idea. Please let me help. I can cover the cost of your surgery. The offer was so unexpected that for a moment I couldn't speak. My parents looked equally shocked, while Amanda's expression shifted rapidly from confusion to anger. Bradford, that's our house down payment money, she objected. He looked at her with what could only be described as growing disgust. Are you seriously objecting to me helping save your sister's life? It's our future, Amanda insisted. Yes, he agreed. It is. The weight of his words made it clear he wasn't just talking about the money. I found my voice then. Thank you, Bradford. That's incredibly generous. But I can't accept. Claire... James began to object. I shook my head. This isn't about money anymore. It's about recognizing what matters, who matters. I looked directly at my parents. I wanted you to step up, not because I couldn't find the money elsewhere, but because that's what parents are supposed to do. They're supposed to protect their children, all their children. I turned back to Bradford. Your offer means more than I can express, but I think we've already found a solution. This was a slight exaggeration, as we were still short, but in that moment, I knew we would figure it out without my family's help. I understand, Bradford said, offering me a card from his wallet. But if anything changes, please call me directly. Bradford, Amanda gasped. What are you doing? He looked at her sadly. I'm recognizing what matters, Amanda. Maybe you should try it. With that parting comment hanging in the air, I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. I had done what I came to do. I had made one last attempt, not just for financial help, but to give my family the chance to be the people I had always wanted them to be. We should go, I said to James, who nodded in agreement. As we turned to leave, my father finally spoke. Claire, wait. This is all a misunderstanding. We can talk about this. I paused at the door. There's nothing left to talk about. You made your choice. I'm making mine. We left without looking back, the sound of Amanda's angry voice following us out. In the car, rather than the despair I had felt after our last confrontation, I experienced something unexpected: strength. For the first time, I had stood up not just for my needs, but for my worth. My phone rang as we drove away from the country club. It was Dr. Harrison, with news that would change everything. I had been accepted into a clinical trial for the exact procedure I needed. The trial would cover 80% of the costs. Between that and what we've raised, James calculated quickly, we're going to make it. As we drove to the airport, I felt the weight of a lifetime of family baggage beginning to lift. Sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family that saves you. Sometimes you have to build that family yourself. The weeks leading up to my surgery passed in a whirlwind of preparations. With the clinical trial covering the majority of the costs and our fundraising efforts accounting for most of the remainder, we were able to schedule the procedure with Dr. Chen at Northwest Medical Center. James took an extended leave from work to be my full-time caregiver. He transformed our apartment into a recovery-friendly space, rearranging furniture to create clear pathways, stocking the freezer with pre-made meals, and setting up a comfortable recovery station in the living room, with everything I might need within easy reach. You've thought of everything, I marveled as he showed me the meticulous schedule he had created for my medications post-surgery. That's my job, he said, simply kissing my forehead. You focus on getting better. The day before surgery, I received a surprising email from Bradford checking in to see how I was doing and reiterating his offer of financial assistance if needed. I wrote back thanking him and explaining about the clinical trial. His reply was warm and contained a piece of information I hadn't expected. He and Amanda had postponed their wedding indefinitely while they reassessed their relationship. I felt a complex mix of emotions about this news, but mostly a sense that perhaps something good would come from this painful experience for everyone involved. The surgery itself was a 7-hour procedure that I mercifully have no memory of. I have scattered recollections of the recovery room, of James's worried face slowly coming into focus, of Dr. Chen explaining that the surgery had been successful in removing the AVM. The recovery was hard, harder than I had anticipated. For the first few days, I drifted in and out of consciousness, battling nausea from the anesthesia and pain that medication could only partially touch. James was there, constantly sleeping on a cot beside my hospital bed, advocating with nurses, helping me take tiny sips of water when I could manage it. After 5 days in the hospital, I was discharged to continue my recovery at home. The simple act of walking from the car to our apartment left me exhausted. But each day brought small improvements. The severe headaches that had become my constant companion began to recede. My vision stabilized. I could stay awake for longer periods. 3 weeks into my recovery, when I was finally beginning to feel somewhat human again, an envelope arrived from Pennsylvania. Inside was an invitation to Amanda and Bradford's wedding, now rescheduled for the following spring. There was no note, no acknowledgement of what had transpired between us. Just the formal invitation, as if nothing had happened. Are you kidding me? James said when I showed him. After everything they send this, I set the invitation aside. They're still my family, James, however flawed. That doesn't mean you have to subject yourself to more of their behavior, he argued. You almost died, Claire, and they still haven't even acknowledged their part in making that time more difficult than it needed to be. He was right, of course. Throughout my entire ordeal, my parents had made exactly one phone call to the hospital to check on my condition. They had sent a generic get-well arrangement that could have been ordered for a casual acquaintance. There had been no visit, no genuine apology, no recognition of the pain they had caused. I won't be attending the wedding, I decided aloud. Not out of spite, but because I need to prioritize my healing, both physical and emotional. I wrote a brief, polite note, declining the invitation and wishing them well. It was the final closure I needed to focus fully on my recovery. 2 months after my surgery, when I was strong enough for short outings, we had an unexpected visitor. Bradford stood at our door looking somewhat uncomfortable but determined. "I hope you don't mind my dropping by," he said after I invited him in. "I wanted to see how you were doing and to talk to you in person." Over coffee at our kitchen table, Bradford explained that he and Amanda had officially ended their engagement. "After what happened at the engagement party, I couldn't see her the same way," he admitted. "I kept thinking about how differently she behaved when faced with a real crisis, compared to how I would want my life partner to respond." Then he went on to share that my parents were struggling with the fallout from the canceled wedding. The story had spread through their social circle, and many people were questioning their decision to prioritize a wedding over their daughter's health. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel good about their discomfort," Bradford clarified, "just to let you know that actions have consequences. And they're experiencing those now." I felt no satisfaction in hearing this, only a lingering sadness for what our family could have been. "I hope they learn from it," I said simply. Bradford nodded. "I hope so too. For what it's worth, I think you're remarkable, Claire. Your strength through all of this has been inspiring." After he left, James and I sat together on our small balcony watching the Seattle skyline as evening fell. "How do you feel about everything now?" he asked, his arm around my shoulders. I considered the question carefully. "I'm grateful," I finally said. "Not for the AVM or the surgery or the family drama, but for discovering who would really be there when I needed them most." The physical healing continued steadily over the following months. I returned to work part-time, then full-time. The design community that had rallied around me during my crisis now celebrated my recovery, and my career actually advanced as new connections and opportunities arose from the network of support that had formed. But the emotional healing was its own journey. I began attending a support group for patients with similar conditions, finding comfort in sharing experiences with people who truly understood what I had been through. One evening, after a particularly powerful session where members discussed the unexpected gifts that had come from their medical crises, I had an idea. "I want to start a foundation," I told James on the drive home. "Something to help people who fall into the gap between what insurance covers and what they can afford for essential medical care." "That sounds amazing," he encouraged. "You'd be perfect for that." With the help of friends in nonprofit management, I began laying the groundwork for what would become the Bridge the Gap Medical Fund. We started small with a focus on helping patients in the Pacific Northwest access innovative treatments not fully covered by insurance. My story became the foundation's origin story, though I always emphasized the positive community response rather than my family's rejection. A year after my surgery, on a perfect spring evening, James proposed during a sunset picnic at the park where we had first met. I said yes without hesitation, my future suddenly stretching before me, bright and full of possibility, a future I might not have had without the support of the chosen family that had carried me through my darkest time. 2 weeks later, I received a tentative email from my mother, the first direct contact since my surgery. She had heard about my engagement through mutual friends and wanted to congratulate me. The message was cautious, expressing hope that we might someday rebuild our relationship, acknowledging, though not explicitly apologizing for the past. I waited several days before responding, considering carefully what I wanted from this potential reconnection. Finally, I wrote back with brief thanks for her congratulations and an equally cautious openness to very limited contact moving forward. I made it clear that any relationship would need to be built on new foundations, with recognition of past patterns and a commitment to change. We have exchanged occasional messages since then, superficial but civil. I don't know if we will ever truly reconcile, and I've made peace with that possibility. Some wounds cut too deep for perfect healing. What I know for certain is this: the value of a person's life is not determined by those who should love them unconditionally but fail to do so. It is determined by the strength they find within themselves when that love is withheld, and by the love they are brave enough to accept from unexpected sources. My journey taught me that family can be those connected to you by blood, or those who stand beside you when your blood family walks away. It taught me that sometimes the greatest act of self love is to walk away from those who cannot see your worth, even when every cultural message tells you that family is forever. Most importantly, it taught me that healing doesn't mean forgetting or pretending the injury never happened. It means growing around the wound until it is no longer the center of your story, but merely a chapter that helped shape the person you became. Have you ever had to choose yourself when those who should have protected you failed to do so? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if my story resonated with you. Remember, sometimes the family we choose becomes the strongest foundation for building the life we deserve. Thank you for listening, and I hope that whatever challenges you're facing, you find the strength to advocate for your own worth.